everybody. Alright, so because I have it set up this way on Instagram, if you ask questions, I should be able to see the questions, which would be excellent. Unfortunately, Twitch can't do that, but you can ask questions in the chat, which is no problem. So, again, apologies about yesterday. There's a better version of the recording on Twitch, which will expire in 2 weeks, I think it is, but also on my YouTube. So if you couldn't make it yesterday, but also if you, what am I trying to say? If you had trouble with the fact that it was mirrored, then yeah, I suggest you check out YouTube. I'm just gonna get chat up on my computer screen. I wish I had the ability to take a photo of how my setup looks, because this is just crazy. There are tripods and lamps and all of that jazz everywhere. I'm impressed. Very MacGyver situation, it feels like. Ooh. Okay. Welcome to day 2. Today we're going to do stem stitch because I figure we continue the trend of doing the easy stuff first. Just adjusting cameras. So we will start with the lights. So we're going to need, and of course I picked the one that there we go. I picked the one that I am low on gloss for. I've got more, I just don't have it wound on a bobbin just yet, but that's okay. So we're gonna do the lights. I mean, you can do whatever stem stitch you want first, but I'm gonna do the lights first, which is the super duper dark grey 3799. And we need 2 strands, and put something in my eye, which is super awesome. I need my pattern, just so that I'm saying the right things. I'm certain it's 2 strands. Yep, okay. So I got 1, 2, and the needle. I got my smaller needle somewhere. That's the same. Alrighty, so I'm going to do my quilter's knot. I've just threaded my needle off camera, of course, because that's super helpful. So I'm going to pinch, wrap around at least 4 times. Not too tight if your needle has a thick eye. And pull through. And that's our little knot. I'm going to slip up the tail. I feel like whenever I do a stitch along, I always do the really boring colours first. Oh, that's good. Out of my way. Alright, so stem stitch. There's a couple of ways to do the stem stitch. This is how I like to do the stem stitch. Basically, we do a tiny little seed stitch. Seed stitch just means a tiny little stitch. Basically, you come up and then go back in really close to it. So go down a little seed stitch, and then I just had a mental blank. I'm going to come back up where we came up before. Try not to pierce the the knot. And then one way when you hold the floss is a stem stitch, the other way is called an outline stitch. I don't really understand why that's the case. I'm just going to move Twitch video. There we go. I don't really understand why that is. Apparently it makes it look slightly different. Do whichever one makes you more comfortable, and we'll call it a stem stitch. As long as you're holding the floss in the same direction for every single stitch. So I'm going to come in about the same length as my seed stitch, away from the end of the seed stitch, and not pull through all the way. I'm then going to come up where we went in to be at the end of the first little stitch, and then pull through. I'm then going to hold my floss again in the same direction, come up, go in, sorry, the same distance that I just did before, pull through, but not all the way through, come up at the end of the last stitch, and pull. And that is a seed stitch. I like the way you think. I'm pretty sure that holding it towards you, if you're going left to right, is the seed stitch, and holding it away from you when you're going left to right is the outline stitch. I've never really gotten a straight answer about what the difference is, or which one is which. But you want it to look like it's not only attached to the fabric, but you want it to look like it's been twisted around. Does that make sense? So I don't think you'd be able to see because it's so tiny. Look at my strands, plain funny. Yeah, I don't think you'll be able to see on the stream just because it's so tiny, but if you look at your own work, it should look like you've twisted the floss and just like plonked it on your fabric. Alright, notice that my Twitch chat disappeared. But that's the stem stitch, basically. I feel like this is a very important stitch to understand, especially if you're planning on doing a lot of floral embroidery, because it's perfect to make stems, clearly called the stem stitch, but it's a lot more forgiving than something like a backstitch. If a backstitch, if you don't line it up exact, like if you're working on Ada, it's different because it's all straight lines. But if you're doing embroidery and you're doing backstitch, it's very easy to make the line that you're creating very wonky looking. Alright, so I'm starting to go around this curve now. I want to make sure that I keep each of my stitches very tiny, because if you think back to like high school maths, a circle is just an infinite number of straight lines. This is the same kind of thing. You'll also notice that I'm starting to pull my floss this direction because I want to keep pulling it on this side of the line, not this side of the line. So the more little tiny stitches you do, especially around curves, the smoother your line is going to be. That's why we started with lots of tiny little stitches. does take longer, but it's definitely gives for a much better finished look. And that's why the lettering is going to take much longer, because there's lots of tiny, tight curves to do. So every now and then I'm just stopping, I'm sort of encouraging my floss to wrap around the way I want it to, just by running the dull end, like the eye end of the needle on the inside of the curve that I'm making. If you're pulling too tight, you'll definitely want to do something like that. I kind of do it out of habit now, not because I really need to. The other thing to note is we are definitely wanting to use just 2 strands, because this end result makes it look like it's 4 strands, because every part of the stitch itself is like there's floss covering it twice. That doesn't make sense. How else do I? We're tracking over ourselves once from where we've been. That also probably doesn't make sense. I don't know how else to put it. It's not like a back stitch where you're not going back over your work, your point. So like my floss is here, but I still have floss to this point. The next stitch that I'm going to do is going to cover half and then the other half of the next stitch. So this little section here is going to have 2 stitches worth of floss on it. I should probably just stop trying to explain what I mean. Hopefully you guys just understand. Alright, so the next challenge, I guess, or next thing to note, is we're about to cross over where we've already stitched. You can just continue as normal. I actually like to try and only have 1 thickness worth of stitch. So I'm going to go, when I cross over I mean, so I'm going to go right up next to the previous line of work, pull through that stitch, and then I'm going to go a little bit further than previous stitches, go in, and then I'm not going to come up where I went in before. I'm going to come up on the other side of the stem stitch, so that it's not so chunky in that crossover, but it still looks like the stem stitch. You'll also note that you may not be able to tell on Instagram, but on Twitch you'll be able to see my floss is actually really tangled, because I have this in the hoop holder, so this thing here, if you can see on Instagram, I can't let my floss hang and unwind. So because you are likely doing it in hand, I do recommend that every now and then you just let your needle dangle in the air, and it'll unwind. It just prevents knotting from happening. I didn't point out at the top of the hour, but I do have to finish a little bit earlier than the full 60 minutes. And again, just a reminder that I'm trying to keep each day between 30 and 60 minutes long, so that it's not too time consuming for everyone. I know that this is potentially a lunch break for a lot of people, but also it means that I can have lunch myself, because I am Pacific time. It's midday, well, it's 12:15 now, but I have an appointment on Tuesdays, so I need to finish at about 1:45. You'll know that my floss is wanting to tangle really bad, so I'm trying to unwind it manually. It's just not as effective as just letting it fall and unravel that way. So my stitches are getting a little bit longer, I'm noting, but that's okay with the section of stitching that I'm at the moment. But it's just definitely something to just keep in the back of your mind while you're doing the stem stitch. I just had a thought regarding what to do each day. So if you haven't done one of my stitch alongs before, I kind of like to try and do a stitch at a time. It used to be that I did a stitch each day, but some of my patterns made that a little bit too complicated, like I had too much of a stitch to fit in an hour's worth of work. But I do like to try and finish one stitch within a pattern before moving on to the next one. So we will be finishing all of the stem stitch before we move on to something else. I would expect that we would do a new stitch tomorrow, but I don't expect that we will finish all the stem stitch today. So today is a good chance for anyone to ask any miscellaneous questions that they might have. If you're on Instagram, there's a question section that I actually have access to today. So if you've got any questions, you can add it there. So I'm going to interrupt myself. So I'm about to finish the stem stitch here. What we want to do is finish it the same way we started it. So I'm going to do just one more regular one. Also so tangled. Alright, so this is the last one. We're going to go in like it's a normal stitch. You're in the right spot. And then we're going to come up like it's a normal stitch, pull through, but we're actually then going to go in where we went in before, so that it's that little half stitch again. And that way you can do, if you want to, I actually do it on the lettering, but you can do more of a taper off if you want to. For lights, it doesn't make sense to me, but for the wording, especially the cross of the T and the flourish of the B and the ends of the S and the R, I'll be doing a tapering off, so you'll be able to see that. But that's the lighting, so I'm very happy with how that is sitting. It's very, it flows very nicely. So I'm going to flip over my work and just cut off my thread. So to do that, you won't be able to see it on Twitch, but it's just like I always do. I just run my thread, or I run my needle through what is the back stitching on the back, because the opposite side of stem stitch is the back stitch, and vice versa. The opposite of the back stitch is the stem stitch. There's a little tidbit for you. I just run it through and then do a couple of knots, basically. And snip it off. Chuck it in my ort jar. Okay, let's get into the mittens, because I want to use this floss, some new colour floss. I'm going to readjust everything. Alright, so again, as I was talking yesterday about the colour issues, I am not going to be using what the pattern calls for with the colorist floss, which is 4235. I'm going to be using 4230. I'm just going to check my questions. That's cool. So I'm going to be using that, just in case you are confused. I don't have enough of this one left, and I couldn't get any more, unfortunately. So that is why it's very similar, but alas, such is life. So again, we want to use 2 strands. For this one, if you want to, you could use 3 if you want to make it a little bit chunkier. I actually have 3 strands here. I'm going to take one out. The main thing to remember is you want, if you are using colorist or even variegated, you want to make sure that the strands change color together. You don't want to like pull these apart and then switch one end so that it's mixed up, because then it won't flow in color. I didn't actually get a very good color gradient on my test stitch, but you can kind of see it's light and then it goes a little bit darker on that one. So anyway, that's just if you want to match what I've done. You can do whatever the hell you want. Alright, let my floss just hang for a second. Now we're going to do our quilter's knot. Chop off the little tail. So it's not going to get pulled. So the reason I chop off the little tail so it's like right at the end of the knot is you can accidentally stitch the tail through to the front end, and it's just annoying. It's just something you gotta fix. So with this one, because we want it to look like it's attached to the 2 mittens, I'm going to start slightly in to where the spiderweb stitch is going to be, and I'm going to do it as a tapering kind of stitch. So I'm going to come up and I'm going to hold my floss this way, because if I'm working left to right, I'd be sitting here, and this would be holding it towards me. So again, it does. I'm not going to critique if you want to hold it this way, if you want to hold it this way, as long as you are holding it in the same side every single stitch, then to me, you're doing the right thing. And then I'm going to come up right where the spiderweb stitch is going to end. Sit properly. Again, let me know if you've got any questions. You can ask questions in the little Instagram question box thingy-bob. I don't actually know what it looks like. I don't watch many people's live videos, so I'm kind of a noob when it comes to being a viewer of a live video, so I apologize. But yeah, I'm more than happy to answer questions if anyone has any. I'm assuming that an easy stitch like this, there wouldn't be many questions from anyone, but if you've got questions about the pattern or about the stitch along in general, or even just like what colors that you should use if you want to change things up, or I don't know, just trying to unwind my floss bit. Yeah, if you've got just general questions, let me know. Oh, I see a question on there, that's cool. How many strands on the colors thread? It's just 2. You could do 3 if you'd like to make it a little bit thicker. This is kind of, because the mittens are really kind of big-ish, you could conceivably make it 3 strands if you wanted to, just to make it look a little chunkier, but I'm using just 2 strands again. All of the stem stitch to match the pattern is 2 strands, because when we stitch it, as I was saying before, it thickens it up to make it look like it's 4 strands. Oh, okay, if I tap it, it's like that. Love this winter project. Yay! I considered, this was months ago when I considered this, but I considered doing it more of a Christmas stitch along. And then I was like, what is the busiest time of year for people? December. Let's not do a stitch along in December. Not only for the fact that people might find it really, really difficult to join live, but also myself. You know, I'm a person too, apparently. So like making sure that I can actually join or complete my own stitch along, and commit to the days. Oh, my voice is disappearing. Oh my gosh, I'm losing my voice. This is really bad timing. I might just quickly have a drink. I've got a Red Bull here. That'll totally help. I'll be starting on Friday. I ran out of fabric and more is coming up Thursday. Woohoo! Well, you should be able to easily catch up because we are doing stuff that's pretty mind-numbing in a way. Like once you've figured out how to do the stitch, I feel like it's really quite simple. Oh, I just noticed the color change in this. That's pretty. But yeah, Friday should be fine. Friday will be another hard finish where I'll have to finish at 12:45 as well because my kids have early dismissal at school and I gotta get there to pick them up at 1. How are you enjoying embroidery, Carolyn? Because I recognize your Instagram handle, and I know for a fact that you're just starting out. Welcome, welcome. I see new people joining. So just a reminder, if you didn't see it before, I'm coming up to the intersection. I've kind of made it a little bit tricky for myself. So I'm going to do a really big stitch going on that the same side of the previous line. Pull it through like normal and then go kind of far away and then come up on the other side. So this side of the line. And that way it's not so chunky where it crosses over. I love it. Yay! It's very freeing embroidery. It's not, I mean, I love cross stitch, don't get me wrong. I think cross stitch will be my ultimate favorite for many years to come. Oh, it's so twisted. Because the constraint of it is awesome. And it's just so easy, but in a oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Because cross stitch is just so easy to do for me, but it has all its nuances and intricacies to make sure that it looks nice. But embroidery is lovely to do because it's just, you can do whatever the hell you want, you know? If you don't want to do a stem stitch, then don't do a stem stitch. Do a back stitch or a whip stitch. Or, I don't know, just a freaking line if you want to. Oh my pulse is super tangled. I've gone through the thread. So I'll show you all. Let my camera focus on you. So you can see that I've pierced through one of the strands. So I've actually got to go, I'm going to take my needle and go through the strand to undo that. Okay. Now it's not completely tangled, just a little bit tangled. That's okay. It's near the end of the strand, so that bit will get cut off anyway. So again, I'm going to taper off. I'm going to do my last stitch that we'll be able to see in the finished piece. And then come up, and instead of going back in like we did with this one in the same spot, I'm going to make it taper off and just go up to like there. Okay, and don't pull that last one through too tight because there's nothing, I'll get my other needle, there's nothing really stopping that stitch from going like that. Does that make sense? So you just pull it through so that it's loose but sitting in the right spot. Can I get rid of that question? Okay. Make sure there's no other questions. Okay. Alright, I'm going to flip over my work. We've got a tiny little gradient of colour in that one, which is nice. Again, I don't know how much you can see what I'm doing, but I'm just running my needle through the back stitches just for a little distance. I'm going to collect the other stitch that I've done and then just run it through a couple of times, grab a loop and just do a little knot and then snip. Alright, so that's 2. What's the time? Oof. Let's start the W, but then I'm going to have to leave it for another day. With the lettering, I have suggested that you use the brown, which is 3031. You can choose whatever color you want. This one is whatever color you want. The reason I picked brown was because the only brown that we used was elsewhere was for the tree bases, and that just, I wanted to bring more non-color, even though brown is a color, but none of the other bright colors that we've done in the piece somewhere else. And it's not this gray, which would kind of, could work. The dark grey could work, but we'd already used it, the grey as a stem stitch already. So that's why I chose this. The other thing to note is the pattern and the finished piece that I've done here. I've done 2 strands. So it's kind of chunky, it matches this and this one. But what you could do if you really wanted to make it look more subtle is just use 1 strand. It's entirely up to you. I'm going to use 2 again, just because I like how thick it looks with 2 strands. So I've got 2 here. My voice is trying to disappear. Throw my needle, let it untwist again. Quilter's not. Alright, so we're going to start with the word winter, and I think we'll get through the W and then I'll need to stop. The W ends fancily, so I'm going to do the did I do this one? Sorry. Yeah, I'm going to taper on this piece, but I'm going to be doing tiny stitches. So we come up right at the end of the line itself, and then I'm going to come in really close, and then halfway through those 2, come up, and that'll give you an indication of how tiny I want to do my stem stitches. And so a reminder, we're wanting to do tiny stem stitches not to be annoying, not to make it take an age, but to make sure that our curve for all of the letters is nice and smooth. This is another reason why, one strand of floss could look really nice, because we are doing it super tight, super small. So you are kind of losing a little bit of that roped twisty look. But in my opinion, for something like lettering that's this sort of size, I would rather it be smooth, curving around edges, than look all twisted. I think there is a cat trying to get in this room. That, or I've got like squirrels or something living in my roof. Which I hope not. I love winter. Beautiful. Thank you. Are you stitching along with us, Luca D. Taylor? If not, why not? I've got one person hanging out over on Twitch that's very quiet. Now I think we've gotten some people that have the hang of the stem stitch and have disappeared from Instagram, which is more than okay. Because it is definitely not one of the trickier stitches that we're going to do. So just a reminder, for the stem stitch, I don't care which side of which side you hold your floss on, as long as you hold it on the same side for every stitch. That's why I'm like Alright, we can do stitches that are a little bit longer at this part, because we're going straight. The only tricky part really is things like the point in the middle of the W. There are other sections of the lettering that are just a little bit trickier. Ow, itchy nose. So I'm making my stitches a lot smaller now, so we can go around the curve of this W a lot nicer. Close eye on the time. So I'm just going to stop, help with the blunt eye end of the needle to make sure that my stitches are all curving the way I want them to. Before I keep going. Oh, my nose is so itchy. What is going on? Okay, I don't want to taper on this bit because it's not the end of a letter. So I'm going to come up at the end of the last stitch and then go in where I went in before. Now to start back again, now I'm going to taper. So I'm going to come in as close to the stitches as possible where it makes sense without piercing my underside of my nail bed. And I need to hold the floss this way. I'm going to do the start of the stitch and then come up halfway through. Can't get the needle in the right spot. There we go. And then keep going. I'm hoping to just finish this W, pushing it for time. So let me know if you're stitching along with me, or if you're just checking out the stream. Because there are a lot more people jumping in to have a squiz than bought the pattern. I'm certain of that. That's okay. We're doing all the easy stuff first. We're working our way up to the more tricky stuff. Ooh, yeah, I've got a little knot in the back. There we go. Okay. So just a reminder, if you're stitching in hand, that's awesome. That means you can let your needle. Yay, you're stitching with me. It's Daniela. Hi. If you're stitching in hand, when I say in hand, I mean you're holding the hoop, not in a like table clamp like what I have. That means you can let your needle hang and unwind, and that'll stop you from getting knots like I have and dealing with twisted floss. I'm stitching while I'm on the lights though, and left it wrong. That's okay. I'm stitching with you too. Yay! That makes me happy. People stitching along with me. So this end of this W is a little tricksy bit because I didn't list it in the pattern. The end of the W is a French knot, which you don't have to do. Since it's not in the pattern, you don't have to do it. But I do recommend you don't taper in the stitch at a minimum. But I ummed and ahed about listing it as a stitch to learn, but it didn't feel necessary for the piece itself, so I didn't. The dot of the eye can just be like some seed stitches as well if you're not comfortable doing a French knot. But I'll just point out, French knots are not that bad. French knots can be amazing. But people have a lot of trouble with them, which, I'll be honest, I don't understand. I do have a very old Instagram reel actually. When I was using reels for like little tutorials before I started making silly reels, I made a reel about how to do a French knot. So you can scroll through my reels and find that, see if that helps you. If you are still stuck with doing a French knot, love French knots. Yay! French knot lover. Not many people like them. Alright, I'm going to go in, I'm going to come up like normal, and then I'm going to do, I did like a really chunky French knot on this one. You can kind of see how big it is. I wrapped it around quite a few times, and I'm not really happy with that. So I'm just going to do it twice on this piece. Twice? Yeah, we'll just do twice, and then I'm going to go in at the end of the last stitch. There we go, that's the W. Yeah, I like that with just 2 points. That's better. Lovely. So they're growing on me. Yes, they take some practice, but they're definitely an important stitch to learn, in my opinion. So we'll leave it there. Thanks so much everyone for joining in. Hopefully you have got the hang of the stem stitch, and we will finish it off tomorrow. I tried doing the whole this is your homework kind of thing in my first stitch along, and people were telling me they didn't like that, so I won't do that. We will finish off all the lettering tomorrow, and then likely we will do something like the lights themselves, or maybe like the stems of the trees or something. I'm not sure, but we're going to be doing some of the harder stuff on Thursday. So thanks so much for joining in, and thanks so much for chatting along with me, and I hope to see you all same time tomorrow. Bye!